on potentially the internet, this is a good time to turn it off. So welcome everyone. My name is Jessica Riles. I'm with University of Florida IFAS Extension. Welcome to our enterprise planning class, Successful Tropical Fruit Groves in South Florida. We're very happy to have you here on a Saturday morning. This is a pretty relaxed presentation, so feel free to just grab a coffee, sit back. We're going to go through kind of the overview of today, and then we'll get right into the sort of meat and potatoes of this whole thing. So if my mouse would work with me this morning. For those of you that don't know what the University of Florida IFAS Extension is, we are basically an arm of the University of Florida. So the IFAS stands for Institute of Food and Agricultural Sciences. Basically, we like to say we hold hands between the farmers and the university. So we help folks, citizens like yourself or farmers, youth programs to basically develop their knowledge in ag, human resource, natural resources, life sciences, and basically information to hopefully make your lives better. And the cool thing is we have a county extension office in every county in the state of Florida. So again, my name is Jessica Riles. I'm the Agriculture and Sustainable Food Systems Agent with UF IFAS Extension Collier County. I work with farmers in the county and the region, pretty much to help them figure out all those in-between steps from growing the food to getting it on your table. So there's lots of things happening there: farm food safety, business planning, marketing, all those sorts of things. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today. And I will let my colleague Jeff introduce himself.
Hey everybody, thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you, Jessica, for inviting me. I'm the commercial tropical fruit agent for Miami-Dade County. So I work with commercial tropical fruit growers. And my name is Jeff Wasilewski, and I've been in the position 9 years. So I'm happy to be here for you guys.
Great. And Jeff has a ton of experience in horticulture, I think close to 20 or 25 years background. So he brings a ton of knowledge to this topic.
Yeah, I'm old, so that's true. It's all true.
Well, that wasn't what I was trying to say. But we're very lucky to have you here, so thank you. So just a few housekeeping things for today's webinar. Just keep your microphones muted for presentations. When we get to some breaks or at the end when we do Q&A, you're welcome to open up your microphone and ask a question, but it just helps for distractions in the background. Again, if you have a chat as we're going through these presentations, or you have a question as we're going through these presentations, put them in the chat. You're welcome to ask it at any time. We may not get to it at that moment, but when we get to the break, we'll make sure to address that chat box. We're going to send you a survey after the meeting. This is super important. And I think actually Jeff has a QR code that you can take it right at the end of this workshop. So at the end of our year, basically the University of Florida and the state of Florida asks us, and our county asks us, what did you do this year? What kind of impact did you make? So we want to be able to demonstrate to them that we're sharing knowledge and resources to the citizens of Florida. This PowerPoint is going to be sent out through email, and if we are recording, I think we are recording, we can send that recording out to you as well. So the basic overview is we're going to talk about economic aspects of starting a tropical fruit grove. Even if you're not thinking, yeah, this could be a business for me, this is good information to know, because you never know, down the line you might decide, you know what, I think I can sell some of these fruits that I'm growing and put money back into my grove. So we'll talk about that for half of the morning. We'll take a break. And then Jeff's going to talk about the fun stuff, which is the site selection, the cultural practices, and kind of in the grove management and what you need to consider. And then we'll have a nice chunk of time for question and answer at the end. So if we're not familiar with Zoom yet, which we were just saying this morning, I'm still learning so much about Zoom. Here are your basic controls. We have the mute, unmute button, your start video if you want to have your picture be shown. You can see who is in the meeting. You can also invite others. If for some reason they can't get in, you can send it through the invite, that chat box at the bottom. And then, of course, if you need to leave, we have that leave button there at the end. All right, so I am going to launch a poll, and we would like to know what kind of tropical fruit enterprise you are planning or currently operating. So go ahead and click on which ones apply to you. I have to tell you that Zoom only lets you put in 10 options. So I know this is not complete, and that's why that last option just has like everything in it. But if there's something else that you're growing that isn't listed here, go ahead and put it in the chat box. We just want to get a sense of who's out there and what you're growing. Let's see what we have in the chat here. Longan, elderberry, dragon fruit. That was a good one to put on there. Yeah, that's something that's kind of emerging. Oh, vanilla, nice. We do a vanilla orchid symposium here in Collier County. Very nice. Okay, so preliminary. Oh, we still have a couple more coming in. All right, I'm going to end the poll and I'm going to share the results with you. So it looks like mango's coming in strong, not surprisingly. That's what most of you are interested in, followed by avocado, lychee, and longan, bananas, sappadilla or sappadilla, depending how you say it. Papaya, nice. Okay, so we've got a total, again, dragon fruit. We've got a nice mix of people, so that's really great to see. So, you know, as we go through this, we're not going to go deep diving into any one particular kind of fruit. We're just going to give you a lot of overview and, you know, kind of briefly touch on these topics. And then when you need more information, you can go through the PowerPoint or, of course, reach out to us if we can help you with anything. So the first part, we're going to talk about the economic considerations, and we're going to touch on all of these things that are listed. These things can be overwhelming, they can be complicated, but it's sort of just, you know, you have to just take it piece by piece and, you know, as I say, just walk down the road and things will fall into place. And we'll talk about a couple good places to start. But again, I'm not going to go into, you know, a lot of detail on these things. This is just a very broad overview. So you might be coming to this webinar with questions like, you know, how many acres do I need? What kind of farming experience? What about insurance? What about zoning? What about management? You know, these are all really good questions and there's so many to answer. But really, when you think about starting this, and depending on where you are when you start, you want to think about what skills you have, the skills that you can utilize, the different markets you want to plug into. What do you value? What's your vision? Do you want to be a really big company or do you want to just be a small mom and pop, you know, business where you're just meeting the local demand for things? How are you going to plan for the unexpected? Very important. What kind of risk are you willing to take? You know, do the big one, can I do what I want to do where I want to do it? I can't tell you how many people call me and say, I want to, you know, have this farm, but my zoning doesn't allow for it. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, but there are so many questions. This is a really good overview, and this is from our enterprise planning EDIS document, and that's basically a peer-reviewed document with the University of Florida. And you can kind of just briefly look through this and see the different investments that you will need in terms of money when it comes to things like small animals, fruits, tree fruits, hydroponic vegetables, things like that. So as you can see, building needs for tree fruits are pretty low. But regulations pretty low, but everything else has a pretty significant investment. So I would say the one thing that's probably more time and resource and money investment is probably vegetable farming. But the flip side of that is that you can get a lot of money for growing vegetables. And it could be for tree fruits too, especially if you're growing something that people really want that they can't find at the grocery store, they can't find easily. You can potentially make a pretty good return on your investment. But just know that it is going to take a lot of time and money to start up or to manage this type of enterprise. So I thought this was a really interesting chart too. So we'll kind of just get into it, right? So if you're looking at kind of the overall expenses, if you look at the production, right? So just in the grove, when we're talking about just, growing that actual crop, when we look at Sappadilla, most of it is going to go towards labor. And this is probably for any agricultural commodity, especially when we're talking about specialty crops. And when we say specialty crops, we mean fruits and vegetables. So these are labor intensive things to grow, to harvest, to manage. There's not a whole lot of automation when it comes to tropical fruits or even vegetables for that matter. So most of your production costs are going to go into paying people to help you manage this. The other cost is going to be fertilizers, and then of course insecticides and fungicides. So we are blessed to live in a place that we can grow tropical fruits, but the reality too is that we are constantly battling with pests and diseases. We have some great folks around the country that get to work in extension. And, I had a colleague who did vegetable production in California. And she said, I worked on an organic farm for 10 years and we never sprayed anything. Well, California has a completely different environment, right? We are just ripe for all the pests and diseases to just make their way here and multiply. So you're going to have to constantly battle that. And of course, depending on the type of fruit that you're growing as well. When we look at overall production costs, so that includes not just what you're doing in the grove, but when you take it outside the farm, right? Harvesting, marketing, the production, of course, is going to be the biggest chunk of what you're doing, but your fixed costs, right? So the things that you buy, your tractors, your equipment, all of that sort of thing, that's going to be a big chunk of your investment. Your harvesting and marketing, right, it's great to be able to grow fruit, but how are you actually going to get it out to people? That's going to take some time and money. And then of course, if you have any interest on capital, if you decide to take out a loan, that's going to eat into your production costs a little bit. So this is just kind of a big picture snapshot. We're going to go through some of these a little more. So I also wanted to share that the Tropical Research and Education Center, which is over in Homestead, and they basically have a number of enterprise budgets. They have one for mangoes. I forget the other ones that Jeff sent over to me, but we're happy to send these out to you through an email so that you can kind of play with these numbers and go through the document and kind of look at what is it going to cost for your irrigation, your fertilizer, your labor, your taxes, your insurance, all that stuff. You can kind of play with this sheet, this Word document, kind of put it in a dollar per acre per year so that you get a general sense of what you're going to be spending on your grove. Okay, so markets. This is important. Research, research, research. Again, it is great to know that you can grow something. And I work with a lot of farmers that grow amazing, amazing food, but you got to have a place to sell it, right? So just because you grow this really unique fruit or vegetable doesn't necessarily mean that there's going to be a market for it. So you really want to look at who is going to be buying your product even before you decide to grow it. Are you going to be growing a new crop, right? Or is this something that has an established market that you know what, mangoes, I know there's a market for it. I can go to a wholesaler and see if they want to buy my mangoes, or buy, a broker can buy some of the mangoes that I'm growing. You want to look at the current market conditions, right? For both conventional and organic. Organic may be what your buyers want, but it may not be. So think about, if you're going maybe the more local route, maybe you're thinking I'm going to sell at a farmer's market. Maybe you want to consider organic. Maybe that customer service base is going to be more interested in that. But if you are selling to a broker or a wholesaler, that may not be as important to them. Also think about what you want too, right? Do you want to sell? Do you have a value to sell organic? Or do you say, you know what, I'm a small grower, I can't afford organic right now, the organic certification, but I am going to use organic practices on my farm. There's lots of, wiggle room here. You may also want to contact packing houses and retail stores and different supermarket chains and restaurants, just to kind of understand what trends are happening, the different prices for crops. This is a question we get a lot. What should I be charging for my product? It can be really hard to decide that. I think especially in a local market, if you're growing a commodity crop where you are selling to a wholesaler or a broker, they're going to pretty much tell you, right, what they're going to pay you. But that local market has a lot of wiggle room, and you might be selling yourself short, if your buyer is deciding they would pay you more because you're local and maybe you're, practicing organic or some sort of food label, standard that they think is important to them. And then, of course, we have Trek over in Homestead, which are an excellent resource, just to kind of talk to the different researchers over there and see what the trends are and what's happening. So I want to see if I can launch another poll. Maureen, maybe you can help me. Let's see, I might have to go to let's see if I can launch the poll from, whoops.
There you go.
Let me just bear with me for a minute, folks. I want to see if I can launch the poll from here. Oops.
I think I launched it for you.
We
did
see
you?
it on the screen.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, awesome. I don't know why I can't see that for some reason. All right. All right, so if you want to, I can't see it, so if you want to take control of it, that's perfect. So we want to see what you're selling, or how you're selling or planning to sell your product. And Maureen, maybe you can tell us what you're seeing on your end.
Okay. Well, we're still getting results in.
Nice.
But number one, it looks like direct to market. So through farmers markets, for example, or roadside stands.
Okay, great. Yeah, direct to market, you have a little more wiggle room when it comes to some of the things we're going to talk about today. And that's good to know too, especially when we start talking about insurance.
I think we can end the poll.
Okay, perfect. Okay, awesome. Thank you for running that. Yep, direct to market, chef's restaurant, online. Okay, so some folks are doing online, which is interesting because that really is a trend that we're seeing more. Even local food sales are going online, which makes it a lot easier for the consumer. And depending how the farmer sets it up, really very easy for them too. Okay, so wholesaler too. Okay, excellent. Very good. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. Okay, good to know. So there are a couple branding and marketing labels that you should be aware of. One is the Fresh from Florida brand. This is an excellent thing to tap into, whether you're going to sell local or in some sort of grocery store setting or anything like that. If you've been to Publix, of course you have, you've seen that Fresh from Florida label. And what this is basically a way to identify to consumers what has been grown in Florida. It's awesome. I try and buy it anytime I see it. It's a very easy thing to tap into as well. And you can just go on that website there, Fresh from Florida, and click that link and follow the instructions on how to participate. If you're over on the East Coast, you could be part of that Redland Raised logo, and Jeff probably has a lot more experience or knowledge on how that works, but it is a subset of the Fresh from Florida branding. So that's kind of interesting. And then here in Southwest Florida, we're developing a brand called Southwest Florida Fresh. Kind of the same concept. You can actually click on that link, swflfresh.com, and register your farm. And it is for people wanting to connect with local producers. So you can list your farm there and list your products. We also have a number of marketing classes that are happening now. So when you get this email this afternoon with the PowerPoint, you can click on this link, and UF and Trek and Trent Blair and some of the folks over at Trek are doing a huge workshop, a series of workshops talking about how to market your product in a digital era. So they have some cool workshops coming up virtually and in person. So check that out if you're interested. Okay, so insurance and crop insurance. Now we're going to start talking about the boring stuff, but the really, really important stuff, right? So insurance might be important for your growth. I know a lot of small producers that do not have insurance, but after this past random freeze that we got, are definitely interested in looking into this option. And there's lots of different kinds of insurance. You know, there's whole farm protection, there's commodity crops insurance. So you can basically go to this website here, Ag Econ, and kind of explore the different policies that might be available for what you want to do, and kind of go through the different insurance loss scenarios. So you may want to get insurance to protect yourself. Again, for many of the diversified crops, so if you're not just going to grow, you know, just mangoes or just avocados, you're going to grow kind of a mixed grow, which a lot of smaller and direct to market folks do. You may want to look at whole crop insurance. Some insurances are specific to tropical fruit. Some are a little bit more broad. So you just kind of have to talk with an insurance agent and figure out what works for you and how much you're willing to pay. Something I did not put in here, but is important to know: if you are selling direct to market, you may need limited liability insurance. And that basically will protect you if you go to a farmer's market and sell your product and something should happen either at your farm stand or with your product. If you tap into a farmer's market, sometimes they will require you to get limited liability insurance, sometimes not, but it may be a good idea. And many of the farmers that I talk to that sell direct to market usually get $1 million liability. So just to cover your bases. If your crop is not covered by a specific policy, you can still possibly get insurance through what's called NAP. So it's a non-insured crop disaster assistance program. So again, there are tons of resources out here. You just kind of have to play around and see what works for you if you want to go that route. Of course, regulations are a big topic. I strongly encourage you to start with your zoning. Again, it breaks my heart when people say, I want to start, you know, this tropical fruit grove here in Collier County, and I live out in the estates, and I'm gonna, you know, the grove part I got, but part of my business model is that I am going to bring people onto my farm, and that's how I'm going to make some of my money. Well, here in Collier County, you can't do that if you live in the estates, depending on your zoning, right? Because it's technically a residential zoning, even though you are allowed agricultural activities. So please, please call your county planning department, your zoning department, and just make sure that you can do what you want to do and what you plan to do on that property. You may also look into your agricultural property appraiser. And so they're going to basically give you that green belt exemption if you qualify for it. And there's lots of requirements for it, but basically it will reduce your taxes on the parcel or the piece of parcel that you're farming. And it's kind of a way to keep agricultural lands in production without the heavy tax burden of perhaps changing it to residential or having some sort of residential tax code on there. You may also need to check with FDACS to see if you need a pesticide license or your workers need a pesticides license if you go that route. It's a series of classes that will also include an exam and that will qualify you to apply certain pesticides. There may also be work protection standards for agricultural workers. And this is, again, just a way to reduce risk and illness to your workers and handlers, especially when you're dealing and if you are dealing with pesticides on your property. Food safety. So there's this thing called Fisma, and we'll get a little bit into that in a few slides. But basically, it's the Food Safety Modernization Act, and there are certain requirements that you may need to meet if you're going to sell your food. USD organic, we'll also talk about that a little bit. That is a regulated term. You may also need to look into your water management districts to see if you need particular water permits, depending on how you're using water, where you're using it, when, all of those sorts of things. And usually you can start this process too by going to your local county community planning department. We also have something called BMPs, and this is basically protected watersheds that you might have to meet certain best management practice requirements in order to not add pollution or nutrients into these water bodies because they're very sensitive. So there may be additional requirements through FDACS. If you're growing avocados, which I saw a couple, actually quite a few of you may be growing avocados, in Florida, you might need to be inspected through FDACS if you're selling any more than 55 pounds per day. And Jeff has a lot of experience with this. And if anyone has questions and wants to talk more about that, we'll have to ask him at the end of the presentation. So this can be daunting, right? There is a lot of regulation out there that you kind of just need to take piece by piece. So again, organic. It's up to you if you want to do organic production. And if let's say you're small scale, I know a lot of small growers don't have that USDA label because they're like, it's kind of expensive. My buyers don't care about it. If I'm at the farmer's market, I can talk to people and say, they can ask me, what are you spraying on your crop? What do I need to be concerned about? And I can tell them, I'm not technically USDA organic, but I do follow the practices. People care very much to interact with producers, maybe even more than they care about that label in a farmer's market setting. But organic is a regulated marketing term. So you can use organic. You can say you're selling organic if you're selling less than $5,000 worth of produce. But I highly discourage it because it is a regulated term. You don't want to have to open yourself to any liability or have, anyone from USDA knocking on your door asking, what exactly are you doing that you feel that you can use this label? This is a regulated label. So if you're interested in those requirements, visit the USDA website. I've heard from some growers that it is expensive, but I also have heard from others that it's not and it's worth it. And that, they don't mind paying it because their consumers care about that USDA label, and they care about promoting soil conservation or some sort of practice that they're doing on their farm. So they use that marketing as an advantage to them. But Florida organic growers might offer some sort of cost share program. Sometimes, they'll send out grants from FDACS or USDA offering sort of a cost share so that they, you can still afford to use this label if you're a small producer. Food safety. So this is a big issue for producers. Basically, in 2011, the Food Safety Modernization Act was enacted, and that basically requires a very low bar of good agricultural practices, also known as GAPs. So it basically outlines ways that you should do risk assessment for your land to make sure you're not introducing microbial contamination to your food product, harvesting practices, training your workers on how to safely interact with food, not harvesting food that has been dropped on the ground or has, animal feces or bird feces on it. It's pretty standard stuff, and many of the producers that we interact with are doing a lot of these things already. But if you're new to farming and new to this kind of food safety aspect of farming, this is going to be a great class for you to take. It's just a ton of knowledge that you can gain on good agricultural practices. If you're earning less than if your gross sales are $25,000 per year or less on a 3-year average, you are exempt from Fisma. However, I will tell you that just because you're exempt from Fisma doesn't mean that your buyers don't want specific food safety requirements. Again, Fisma is the low bar. Anyone that is selling to a Publix, a Walmart, a Winn-Dixie, any of those big, a Taco Bell, McDonald's, they have extremely tough food safety standards. So when we see these folks, we know they're going to pass this Fisma class with flying colors because their buyers and potentially your buyers are going to be asking a lot more of you in terms of food safety than Fisma will. But again, it's a great educational opportunity, and it's fairly cheap to take. I think it's $35 for the class, and that certification follows you for the rest of your life. Labor and time are going to be very important, right? So we saw that pie chart. This is the most expensive aspect of your operation. Depending on what you're growing, how you're growing, where you're growing is really going to impact that labor and time aspect. So it might at first glance seem like a good idea to do diversification, a little bit of everything in your grove. Well, that's really going to spread out your year, and it's really going to spread out your labor. So maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that's a bad thing. You really have to do that risk assessment for yourself and see. Sugar apple is going to be most intense April to October. Banana is going to be pretty labor intensive year round. So you really want to look at the cultural practices and requirements for these fruits that you're going to be growing. Also think as in terms of diversification, maybe that's good for if you have crop failure or poor sales, you can make up in some other way, but you also are probably going to have to find different markets for those different products. So again, just kind of play with the different scenarios and see what works good for you. One thing that I do see a lot of small growers doing is they don't pay themselves for their time. So, they're basically, working on the farm all days, all hours of the night, but they're not actually paying themselves. So maybe you want to look at a more holistic farm management plan and figure out what's the number that you're willing to do to make a profit, to pay yourself, and what that looks like over, a year, 2 years, 5 years. And when you are going to decide, I'm losing money on this operation, this isn't going to work for me. It's important to understand all of the different scenarios. And again, we have more resources if you want to talk more about that. Of course, your capital and equipment costs are going to be significant as well. So not just the fertilizers, the pesticides, but also, your tractors, your mowers, your sprayers. It's a lot more than you might initially think. So Also think about if you get a nice piece of equipment, that is great. Do you know how to fix that? Do you know where to go to get that fixed if it breaks? So know that there is going to be significant input on your capital and equipment costs. And this is kind of a list that we put together, and I checked with some of the tropical fruit growers here in Collier County to see how on point we are here. And this is a pretty extensive list, but you're going to need a lot of these things. Of course, depending on the size of your operation, things like, your shade cloth and shade house, your packing sheds, your processing equipment, that stuff can get really expensive and really bring up the price. But starting on all grows, right, you're going to need those horticulture equipment. Even just maintaining the weeds in your grove or just mowing, right? You're going to need equipment for that. So it's pretty extensive. It's more than you might think of at first glance. And then, of course, fertilizer costs. So you can use lots of different information. You can come to Extension and talk to us. You can talk to commercial fertilizer suppliers. You can get your soil tested and a leaf analysis tested to make sure that you're applying the right kind of fertilizer costs. But this is going to be a yearly requirement. And typically in our part of the state, it's going to be anywhere from 3 to 10 times a year, depending on the tree, depending on the crop, depending on the tree size. So fertilizer costs are pretty significant. You don't want to apply more fertilizer than you need, mostly because it's going to impact the environment around you, right? You don't want any runoff, but it's also going to be a waste of money because that tree is not going to take up extra fertilizer or nutrients it doesn't need. It's going to get leached into the groundwater or your surrounding property, and that's just going to be wasted money for you. So you really want to focus on a good fertilizer program and gather as much information as you can. A little note about selling processed fruit. So a lot of folks will grow like mangoes, right? And they'll say, and I'm going to make all this mango product and sell it at the farmer's market. Maybe. Okay, generally, you do not need a permit to sell uncut, unprocessed fruits and vegetables in Florida. So I take my mango from the tree and I sell it at the farmer's market. I don't need a permit from the state of Florida. I don't need any type of permit. But the minute that you decide I'm going to make that into a fruit leather or a mango jam or something, you might be open to Florida's food establishment permits. There is something called the Florida Cottage Food Law. Again, when you get this PowerPoint, you can go down all these rabbit holes and see what all these things are about. But the Florida Cottage Food Law basically allows for low risk, limited foods to be sold from your home kitchen. Things like jam, jellies, cookies, popcorn balls, cereals, these types of things, breads. These are low risk foods that people, you haven't heard of a foodborne illness outbreak from bread, right? Because it's just based on the composition of that food. It's a pretty low risk in terms of botulism or some sort of food poisoning. Things like beef jerky, seafood, fruit smoothies, those are a no-go under the Florida Cottage Food Law. So just know that if you're thinking of taking your fruit that you're growing it and sort of doing some value added, what we call, basically turning it into something else that you can sell, you might be subject to Florida's food permits. And there's a great video I did about 2 years ago using your tropical fruit under the Florida Cottage Food Law. So what that might look like. What about grants? So this is a question I get a lot. And I hate to break it to people, but really loans are probably more realistic for startups. You're not going to get grants for startups. It's tough to get farm loans as is because it's a high risk business that you certainly can lose a lot of money on. Once you are up in production for a couple years, grants become more available to you. If I step back a minute and talk about loans, you can get loans from the bank or you can get loans from USDA. They have something called a micro loan program that might be more realistic for what you want to do. But once you're kind of up and in production for a couple of years, grants, cost share programs start to become more available to you. These are things like land improvements with NRCS, organic cost share programs. USDA will offer some marketing services. If you're looking to diversify your market or tap into a new market, they may be able to help you. Know that with grants and cost share programs, the paperwork is long. It's a lot, right? And it's a lot of time to really sit down and do this kind of paperwork and all the follow through that needs to happen. So it can be a little bit of a deterrent, but there are folks out there that can help you with this step. The first thing that you want to do, I think, is to start with FSA. So that's the Farm Service Agency. It's basically through USDA. And you can sit down and talk with your local agent. You spend about 30 minutes to an hour with them, and you provide your address, your social security number, or your EIN number if you're going that business route. They're going to locate your parcel through the GIS system, and they're going to issue you basically a farm number. And the way that you get access to a lot of these programs is by having that farm number. So if a disaster relief issue, money comes down, freezes, hurricanes, floods, COVID relief, you're not going to be able to access those if you are not registered with the USDA and have that farm access number. I understand why, especially the more smaller producers don't want to be, they don't want to be involved in USDA. They want to stay under the radar. And, USDA has a very long history of some really, challenging and shady things that they've done to especially minority farmers. And I understand that completely, and they don't want to deal with them. But if you want to access some of this money and some of these entitlements that you pay tax dollars towards, you're going to need to be registered with USDA. When we're talking about loan processing, so again, grants probably not that realistic for what you want to do at this point as a startup, but a loan might be the route that you want to go in. Maybe. Here's kind of what you're going to need to get a loan. Don't be discouraged if you go to the loan, try and get a loan with the bank, and the bank says, nah, we're good. We don't. Bank of America is not going to give you a loan for your tropical fruit grove. That's okay. There's still some loans that you can get with USDA, as specifically the micro loans. And actually, sometimes you may need a rejection letter from the bank in order to get that loan. So again, you'll need tax returns, balance sheets, financial information, production information. You're going to be asking someone to give you a chunk of money. You need to show them that you're going to be able to pay that back. And I want to very quickly talk about business plans. I've got about 3 minutes left to talk to you about this, but this is a really, really important aspect. If you don't start anywhere, start with a business plan. I mean, this is like the number one step before you even get your hands on work and get your hands dirty in the grove. 25% of farmers have a business plan. That's very, very low. And then for those that do have a business plan and review it annually, they actually get a 5 times higher return on their investment versus those that don't. So no matter where you are in your business plan development, it's going to be really important to flesh that out. Marketing, operational, financial decisions, new market opportunities, and then I think most importantly, communicating to your lenders, your business partners, your stakeholders. I have thought this through. Even if you're a nonprofit and you're working for, trying to get others, partners to invest in what you're doing, you've got to really communicate that you've thought through all of these different aspects. A good farm plan is one that gets used. It's a living document. It's going to consider things like external factors as well. So the Marriott, the JW Marriott down on Marco Island, you better bet your bottom dollar that they have some sort of business plan and some sort of disaster plan in place should something happen, right? They're a huge international corporation hotel on a beach on an island. They know they're going to get floods. They know they're going to get hurricanes. It would be silly for them not to think about what are we going to do when this happens. So those external factors are really important. It's you don't know when these things are going to happen, but you know they are going to happen. And again, who needs a business plan? Pretty much anyone at any point of your development. And I want to very quickly talk about a way to do this. So a SWOT analysis is a great tool you can use. Strength, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, right? What's going well for your farm? Where are areas that you can improve on? And then where are the potential threats that you might run into? Here's kind of an analysis that you can look at. So this startup farm says, okay, I'm really good with local food movements. I have experience growing mangoes. I was a former business development and insurance agent. Huge, that's a huge strength. I have good people skills, so I can sell to the farmer's market. I have a wife who has an off-farm job with health insurance, which is super important. I have good family support, good communication. You might think, what does that have to do with starting a business? Let me tell you, if you want to be on the farm and your significant other does not, you're going to have a problem, okay? Good health. These are all strengths that you can work with. The weaknesses are the things that you can really improve. So this person says, you know, I don't have a whole lot of I have a very limited marketing experience. I'm not really sure. Do I want to go wholesale? Do I want to go direct to market? I don't really have access to land. My part of Florida is quickly urbanizing, so land's really expensive. I don't have a lot of startup capital. I don't have experience fixing equipment. I'm unsure of exactly what kind of trainings or food safety things I need. I don't know exactly what regulations. I'm going to need to hire labor. These are things that are weaknesses, but you can improve upon them. So this person can say, you know what, I don't have a lot of food safety training, but I'm going to go to the Fisma class and I'm going to learn about it and I'll get my certification. Those are the areas that you can really improve on and make a difference, basically. All right, so that was a lot of information. We are going to take a break. We'll take about a 10-minute break, and then we're going to get started with Jeff's presentation. Feel free to use the restroom, refill your coffee. If you have a question, plop it in the chat, and we'll see you back here in about 10 minutes. Okay, good.
Okay, everybody, we're gonna get back here. So come back wherever you are. My name is Jeff Washaleski. I'm the Commercial Tropical Fruit Extension Agent. I'm gonna talk about setting up a new grove. I'm gonna quickly touch on some of the stuff that Jessica so expertly talked about. She did a fantastic job. Unfortunately, everything is downhill from here. I'm not gonna do a great job, but I'm going to try my best. So a lot of these slides come from Dr. Jonathan Crane. He's a tropical fruit specialist. Jessica mentioned the Tropical Research Education Center, which I'll talk about. So we are from UF-IFAS Extension. I'm from Miami-Dade County. UF-IFAS Extension has an office in every single county, all 67 counties. And we also have research centers. I'm way down here in Miami-Dade County. I'm actually south of Miami and Homestead. And right next door, we have the Tropical Research Education Center. And there you have a tropical fruit specialist, Dr. Crane, who I mentioned, tropical fruit entomologist. We have a pathologist. We have a tropical fruit plant breeder. So my job is to listen to them, take their information, and then extend that to my clientele. So that's what I'm trying to do today. So some self-promotion. I do have something called Tropical Fruit Tuesdays. We just had one on pruning fruit trees, and we have another one coming up in May 24th that I stole from the West Coast called Jamas, which is jackfruit, avocado, meme, ananas, and starfruit. That'll be the 20th unique Tropical Fruit Tuesday. They're all on YouTube, all 19 of them. And then we're gonna have in June just straight up jackfruit. We have a lot of different ones on different crops. We have one on meme, we have one on mango, one on jackfruit, one on lychee. So if you want a deeper dive and you want help sleeping, they're about 40 minutes each. They're on YouTube. You just go to YouTube and search Tropical Fruit Tuesdays, and nobody else has that name yet, so it'll pop up. So I like to always start with where to get good information. Jessica mentioned EDIS documents. These are peer-reviewed documents, University of Florida, and you can find them in this great new website called Ask IFAS. So you search Ask IFAS, it says, what can we help you with? You pop in mango, you get a 19-page document on everything you ever want to know about mango, and it's peer-reviewed, meaning someone can't just write it and put it up there. My website, which I'm gonna show you in a little bit, I can write stuff. I'm the webmaster. I can just put it up there, which I don't do, but I could. But for the EDIS documents, which I have a few, these have to be peer reviewed, and they're very good information. You can get information from other universities. If University of Florida doesn't have it, just search your topic and then EDU. YouTube, I mentioned, all the Tropical Fruit Tuesdays are there. YouTube is good because you actually see what they're talking about. So if you watch 3 or 4 videos on hand pollinating and nonas, you're gonna get a pretty good idea of how to do it, even if some of them aren't perfect. Master gardeners, I would imagine some of you are master gardeners, good place to get information. Plant clubs and societies, join one. They're excellent because you have experts there in the club and you'll learn each month. Number one place is your own garden or your grove. You gotta walk the grove, you gotta put your feet in the grove, you gotta see what's going on before it becomes a problem. And then finally, beware of the source of your information. Just because it's the first thing that comes up when you search, it doesn't mean it's correct, especially for South Florida, because the rules are different here. So we're going to quickly go through some of the things Jessica went through. So planning is important. Make a plan, look for market demand. How are you going to market the produce? Look at land values and taxes. Look at the availability and the cost of labor. Labor is very hard to get right now. Look at your climate, your soils and water, which I'll break down in a bit. Your temperature maximums, minimums, average rainfall, which down in my neck of the woods is very high in the summertime and then very low in the winter, or the dry season and the wet season, as we call them. Look at the elevation of your site. This is very important. We have down in Homestead, we have higher areas, which are only about 8 to 18 feet above sea level, but then we have lower levels that are a different type of soil called muck. And it's very hard to grow tropical fruit in these areas. And we'll talk about that in a bit. Do you have access to water? What is the quantity and what is the quality? Some of you on the West Coast, if you're near the ocean, your water is going to be a little salty, so that's not great. And if you're growing near the ocean, on either coast, the salt spray is going to be a problem. I know I have some growers in Key West or in the Keys, and it's more difficult for them to grow tropical fruit because of the salt spray. So match the crop and the grove site. So appropriate crops in the appropriate environment. So look into your tropical fruit crop horticulture. That's what I specialize in. I have classes every month, usually 2 per month. I think last month I had a ton. I had about 6. So get on my email list and you'll find out about them. Most of them are free. We have one on Monday, which is a growers forum. It's at 4 p.m. and it's 4 to 4:50 p.m. It's in combination with the tropical fruit growers of South Florida. And it's just growers meeting together to help each other out. We'll be doing that once a month on the second Monday of the month at 4 p.m. Also look for your crops to be environmentally adapted. People want to grow things that won't work in their area. And that's fine if you're going to grow one or two, but it's not okay if you're going to do that commercially. And then, of course, your site selection, super, super important. So needs, irrigation system, windbreak possible, land preparation, clearing, rock plowing. That's for South Florida or my neck of the woods, because we have oolitic limestone. We have literally rock that we grow in. Trenching, leveling. We talked about equipment, pole barns, transportation, trucks, vans, ATVs, and then your labor, which Jessica did a great job of saying the importance of that and accounting for your own labor when you do the economics. So you're going to go organic or conventional. Here's some websites that you'll get in the PowerPoints. Jessica mentioned these. Market issues, demographics. What about that? Because you have certain fruit that certain people like, so you have to fill those niches. You're going to do some in-person investigation. You're going to do some online crop cost analysis. Here's some websites that I'll show you in a minute. Your competitors, domestic and foreign. Foreign competition is fierce. And there's some products right now like Meme. Meme is not being imported, so it's a pretty good crop to grow. But once that is okay to import, it's going to be very difficult to make money growing Meme. And then the seasonality of your market and potential niche markets. Niche markets are super important for smaller growers. So you have commodity groups. We mentioned, Jessica mentioned the avocado marketing order. That's a federal marketing order. Meaning you can only sell avocados at a certain size, at a certain cultivar, at a certain time of year. And what that means is you can't sell an avocado before it's ready, because they look ready. So people might try to jump the market and get them out there, but then they're never going to ripen. So that becomes a bad product. So that's something that if you want more information, contact me. I can explain it to you. And then you have the tropical fruit growers of South Florida, which I work with each month, and they are a good group because they have a lot of knowledge within the group. Then you have commercial associations like the Progressive Grocer and the Packer. So we have a very diverse nation, which is very good for your tropical fruit because a lot of people like different things. So you can grow those different things and you can get them to the appropriate groups and you can make a little cha-ching. So we have this website, which is the Agricultural Economic Extension website. This is through TREC. And it's kind of outdated. Dr. Trent Blair is the new economist. He's been doing all kinds of great things, including that digital marketing class that Jessica mentioned. I believe next week they're going to have that class in Spanish. We already had it in English. It's available online, so you can watch it. It is free. And then I believe it's the 19th. We're going to have an in-person meeting. The other two were online. We're going to have an in-person meeting where you fill out your digital marketing guide that he's created. So there's lots of information on this site, which I'm sure he'll be updating. Some of the things he's updating now are these cost estimates. This is an EDIS document from 2010. He's got some brand new ones. And then Jessica showed you one of these estimated production costs. And this one is for bananas. So it tells you everything. It tells you what you should make at the end. So per acre, you're going to make about $1,713.37. So not a lot. And that's if everything goes well. We know this year, if you're a mango grower, commercial mango grower, at least on our side of the state, we had probably the worst year I've ever seen. We have barely any mangoes. In my own grove at work, I used to pick by the bucket. Now I'm picking by the fruit. So I used to bring in a whole bunch of fruit for the staff. Now I'm handing out fruit one by one. And then Fruit and Spice Park, almost nothing. Trek, they have a big collection of 200 different cultivars, almost nothing. So it's been a terrible year. And I see something went up in the chat. I'm on a very little screen, so I can't really look at the chat. But Jessica, if it's important, feel free to interrupt me. That's no.
No, that's okay. It was just me.
Oh, okay.
I was saying it's not great over here either.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's not great over there either. That information just came in. So competition, there's plenty of that. We have this website, the USDA Agricultural Marketing Service, where you can go and you can get the prices that what fruit are selling for at the moment. So this is up to date. They don't have all the tropical fruit, but they have a lot, and we'll tell you what it's selling for in New York, what it's selling for in Chicago, where it came from, and typically it's coming from foreign places. So here's some prices. So commodity groups, we have the avocado one, which I mentioned, the informal groups, the tropical fruit growers of South Florida. They have a nice website. Marketing options. Jessica mentioned these, so I won't go through these. Packing houses, here's a bunch of different packing houses. I have a list of packing houses, which I'm going to show you my website in a minute, which is pretty comprehensive. Farmers markets, you can do CSAs. Internet, very important. This is growing by leaps and bounds, especially with COVID. People have decided they can get their products very easily online, but that's still going on. So here's my website, which I put a lot of work into, and you can find it if you search Miami-Dade Extension Tropical Fruit. So this website will come up. You have my contact information there. You have a more current picture of me there. Jessica put a very flattering picture of me from back in the olden days at the beginning. At the top, I have major tropical fruit pests and diseases. So these are two big problems: Laurel Wilt with avocados, Lychee Aranos mite with lychee. So we have a fact sheet for commercial growers, how to manage it, and for homeowners, how to manage Lychee Aranos mite. And then I have a whole web page on Laurel Wilt. I have a EDIS document on pruning. I have an EDIS document on propagation. The Tropical Fruit Tuesday webinar series that will send you to YouTube. Tropical fruit spacing. We have a document on that. So if you want to know how to space your trees, what you should get for crop yields, good cultivars, that probably needs to be updated. And seasons, when do fruits come into, when are they mature? When can you pick them? Where to buy fruit trees. So it's a list of nurseries. Where to buy pesticides and fertilizer. That's another list. A list of packing houses. A document, why won't my tree fruit? These are reasons why you're not getting fruit. That needs to be updated too. Tropical fruit acreage in Florida. So who's growing what? And it's centered towards Miami-Dade County because that's where the most acreage is. But there's another column that says other places in Florida. Planning a successful commercial fruit grove. That's what this whole workshop today is based on, that document. There's one on irrigation systems for fruit groves, what your tree is worth, economics, and the tropical fruit economic data sends you back to that Trek site that I showed you. And there's more information down at the bottom that I didn't show you. One of them is how to apply for your Miami-Dade agricultural tax exemption. So if you have commercial tropical fruit land or vegetable or nursery, you can get a tax break on your land. So something to think about, big time: climate, the weather. What can you grow? So you can look up your historical monthly temperatures. This comes from the Southeast Regional Data Center. So there's plenty of ways to look this up online. And there are crops you can grow in these climate and crops you can't. People want to do a lot of things like blueberries down in South Florida or peaches. They just can't do it because we're too warm. And then they want to go north and grow something like guanabana, and you can't do that because it's too cold. We are getting a little warmer here and there though, so it's possible to push the envelope, and people are doing that. So average monthly rainfall, you see it really picks up starting around May, and then it drops off in October. So you get a lot more rain in the what we call the wet season, and then you have a big dry season. And that dry season is important for things like avocados and mangoes, because that slows them, and lychees and longans, and that slows them down and tells them it's almost time to bloom. And then once it's typically a cool front or a banked amount of cold hours, which you wouldn't think for tropical fruit, but it is. So you get a nice cool front, and then mangoes will bloom about 30 days after that cool front. So they are slowed down by the no rain. The temperatures are a little cooler, the humidity is down, and then they get that cool front, and that says, okay, it's time to bloom. And then your hours of daylight, important. Wind speed, of course, this can pick up if we have a tropical storm event. So one thing to mention about that is you want to keep your trees pruned and keep them smaller for many reasons, but one of them is for tropical storms. Where the wind is coming from. And you can look all this up. So cold temperature tolerance. This is a fact sheet that I need to make because this isn't really available. So what I'll do is I'll steal Dr. Crane's information, put him as first author, and put me as second author, and then I get a publication. So that's a little tip for you extension agents coming up. But here is the cold temperature tolerance, where the temperature which damage or death can occur. So you can look at this and you can see that there are some things that can take a little more cold, like avocado. Canistel can take a little, jujube quite a bit, kumquat, but then you have things like sappadilla that can't take as much, et cetera, et cetera. So this chart will be in the PowerPoint when it comes to you. And also, like I said, I'm going to be putting this on my website fairly soon. So our soil is rock. Your soil over there on the west is more sand. In both cases, pretty good drainage, but not, it doesn't hold, they don't hold nutrients well. Usually when you have good drainage, you don't hold nutrients well. So you're gonna have to provide nutrients. So our elevation is about 5 to 20 feet above sea level. And 20 feet, you're really pushing it to find that area. There's very rare areas where it's 20 feet above sea level. We're mostly limestone. It's a limestone called oolitic limestone. It's only found in our area and in the Bahamas, this particular type. The pH is very high, 7.4 to 8.5. 7 is your typical, that's right in the middle. And then anything above that is alkaline. So it's harder to grow things. You're gonna have to put your minor elements on the leaves, because if you put minor elements into the ground, they get bound up by that high pH. So very low organic matter, low cation exchange. So again, it doesn't have organic matter. It doesn't hold, when you have organic matter that holds nutrients, it has nutrients, low water holding capacity. And and it's excessively drained, which is actually good because you saw all that rain that we get. So if we didn't have good drainage, that would be an issue. So to prepare the land, you usually rock plow, you trench, you level, and you drill the holes or you dig the holes with a backhoe. So you're basically scraping the rock, the top layer, to get some sort of what I will call soil, which is really just broken up limestone. So mulching will definitely help, but that's very labor intensive and expensive. So flood tolerance, we have this chart as well, which I'm going to steal. So we have some that are tolerant: Guava, Sappadilla, Caimito, coconut, grafted citrus, depending on the rootstock. Moderately tolerant: banana, canistel, carambola, lime, longan, lychee, mango. Not tolerant. So if you have a low-lying area, you want to stay away from atamoya, avocado, jackfruit, mamey, papaya, passion fruit, and sugar apple. And there are some low areas, and you need to really check that before you purchase your land. One thing you can do is just wait after a big rain and then drive to the area and see, is it holding water or not? You can also check the soil charts in your area. So land prep, you're going to rock plow to create this layer of rock. You're going to trench to create deeper soil profile. So you don't have to trench. You can dig the holes with a backhoe or with an auger. But typically, some people will do like a cross trench, like an X throughout the whole grove to create these little areas for the roots. And again, in the sandy area, you're not going to have to do all this because your roots are going to be able to go free through the sand. If you do have low-lying areas, you might want to bed the areas. You might want to make beds. So you would use some fill. You would bring in fill. Make sure the fill is well draining as well, because you don't want to create these areas that the water just sticks into. So irrigation, this is a big, big issue. You want to have good irrigation. You want to be able to put out water, especially new trees need irrigation. You're not going to get away with hand watering. And then you also think about irrigation for cold protection, because irrigation is your #1 way to protect these tropical fruit from cold. And we have a whole series of videos on how to do that. So those are available on YouTube as well. Dr. Crane taught those, so they're there. So one thing you can do, which doesn't really work in our soil over here on the East Coast, but it should work for you guys in the sand, you have these tensometers that you can put that tells you how moist the soil is. You can actually have some that connect to your phone, so you can know when it's time to water, and then you can just go on your phone and water. We do have irrigation specialists in the University of Florida that we can hook you up with that can really give you some great information on putting in a good irrigation system. So freeze protection, freezes can still happen. It is something that can happen. So a couple of things you can do for freeze protection is something called pre-freeze irrigation, where you water your land very well about a day before the freeze. You can't do it the day of the freeze. So you water it very well. So you have to see the freeze coming down the state. And then you put all this irrigation down into your land, and then that water, that wet land holds heat. So that'll help a little. And then you have different types of systems. You have the high volume under irrigation, which is this top left picture. You have these bubblers, top or bottom left. You have different irrigation systems, and the more water you can put out on the trees, the better for freeze protection. So some people have two different irrigation systems. One that will just cover the trees, and especially the trunks, to protect them from the cold, and then some that really just water the roots. And then if you're gonna protect from cold, you need a diesel engine so that if the power goes out, you'll still be able to water. The water needs to run all night. You need to turn it on before the irrigation or before it freezes. So you're monitoring the temperatures. Right before it freezes, you turn it on. The water hits the trunk. And as that water turns from water to ice, it releases a little bit of heat. And that little bit of heat insulates the trunk and keeps it alive. And here's some links where you can monitor weather. So don't think it can't happen. It can. We almost had it this year. After many years of not getting close to a freeze, we almost had freezes. We were right on the cusp. So we did have some of the bigger growers that turned on their irrigation to protect their growths. And of course, with that irrigation, it has to cover your entire grove. It can't be in zones because you have to run it until the freeze danger is gone, and then you shut it off. So here's a lot of freeze damage, what I'm showing you here in these pictures. So very important when you're first starting out, what's your spacing and your density going to be? Your distance within the row and your distance between the rows. The distance between the rows is typically going to be bigger. Here's a lime grove on the right. You see they put 2 rows of limes in 1 row, and then they have the space in between the rows, which is bigger, and that's so you can drive your truck through there, you can drive your sprayer, your pickers can get through there. So that's going to be wider than it is within the row. So you're going to do a square, you're going to do a rectangle, diamond pattern, multi-rows like this one here. And what they would do in this multi-row is as these get bigger, they would take out every other one, probably in a zigzag pattern as they get bigger. And then how many trees per area, what's your density? So the effects, the considerations, how much light are you going to get? What's your flowering and fruit set yields, crop quality? So this is all goes into your spacing. How are you going to train the trees? Are you going to be kind of hands off, or are you going to prune them pretty often? If you're going to prune them, once a year, and you're going to prune them when they're younger to get their size under control, then you can put them a little tighter. And your appropriate equipment, you can do a lot of hand pruning when they're younger, but when they're older, like these mangoes to the right, you're going to use typically a hedger and a topper. So this big machine that just cuts the top and cuts the edges, just like you would a hedge. That's much more economical than trying to do it by hand. So more spacing factors. How vigorous are your trees? What about your rootstocks? Some rootstocks are a little bit dwarfy, so you can get a little tighter. Your effect on production and fruit quality over time. If you plant too closely, you're going to have an issue. If you plant too far apart, you're losing out on some of your production. How is the ease of the tree size, and how can you maintain it? Guavas and carambolas are going to be real easy to keep smaller. Mangoes and avocados, lychee, longan, and may, not so much. They're bigger trees. They're going to be harder to control. The spacing can make it easier for your cultural practices like pruning and spraying and picking. And if you're too tight, you're going to have insect and disease pressure. Jessica mentioned how South Florida is just a hub for disease and insects, and it really is. And then potential changes in time, high to moderate to low density. So are you going to have the guts to go in there and take out every other tree as the trees get bigger? A lot of people start out with that idea, and then once they get to that point, they're like, well, I think I'm going to keep everything and just see what I can do. So here's an example of tree spacing. And don't worry about writing this down. You can certainly take a screenshot or a picture, but this is on that website that I showed you. And it's actually, I have it by species. So something like a guava is going to be tighter than an avocado. This is in the back of my EDIS document on pruning and training young tropical fruit trees. So we have recommended height, where you want to keep the height. And then it goes on for all the different species. Here's the rest of them. So you see, we want to keep them no higher than 15 feet. And the mango can grow 50 feet. Avocado can grow 50 feet. So pruning is very important. Windbreaks, very expensive. So if you're going to do one, you're probably not going to have a shade house like they have here in the top left. That's something they did at Trek for carambolas. They did get better yields, but they also lost the shade house when the hurricane came along. That bottom left picture is a windbreak of Sappadilla that's actually from the 1930s, and it's being kept right about 18 feet. That's a Trek as well. And then if you have a windbreak like that, you're still going to get some fruit off of your windbreak. So that's something that you can do. It can interfere with your crop, and so it can be, there are some issues. It takes land away from your crop. But if you're mixing in different, like Sappadilla hedges is a pretty good idea because you can get fruit. It's very dense. You can prune it. It'll do what you want. It'll stay in that hedgy type way. So intercropping, do you want to mix your plantings? So do you want to have, I see a lot of growers, they put tamarind, they put guava, they put papaya, they put some annonas, and they mix them all together. So this can be good or this can be bad. This can be good because you're diversifying what you're selling, and some of those things will produce fruit much quicker than some of the others. So you can have a longer season, you can have different crops. Like if you have just mangoes this year, you had a bad year and you're not going to have a good year financially. But if you had a diversity of crops, you have a chance to make money in other ways. Now, some of the negatives, they can crowd each other because they're going to be growing at different speeds. They can compete with each other. And then pest control legal issues. So what that means is pesticides are labeled specifically for specific crops. So if you have sugar apples, tamarinds, and papayas all in the same row, and you go and you spray the sugar apples to get rid of the seed borers, well, what you sprayed on those sugar apples is going to get on the other two species, and it might not be labeled. So you just broke the law. Because the label is the law, you have to read those labels. Whatever it says, that's what you have to do. So always read the labels. So Jessica talked about Fisma. I looked up, and we do have a Fisma workshop November 15th. That will be in the extension office. And then we have one November 16th in Spanish. So if you need to take that class and you're on the East Coast, I'll be sending out how to sign up for that as we get closer. She talked about pesticide licensing. So that's important. You can't buy restricted use pesticides unless you have a license. I can't teach about pesticides unless I have a license. So I have a license. And I maintain that license by CEUs. So I take classes on pesticides, so then I can renew my license without having to take the pesticide test all over again. Okay, so the second part of our conversation is what can we grow? What can we grow? Pros and cons. And I'm going to lean heavily towards the cons, because when people come to me and say, okay, I just bought 5 acres, what do I grow? Immediately I'm like, well, that's an issue that you bought the acres already and you're just now thinking about it. You saw Jessica you need to make your plan way ahead of time, think everything out, look at the economics, look at the marketing, all these things. But nonetheless, this happens. But let's talk about some of the tropical fruit. We're not going to get into all of them. And I'm assuming I have till about 10:50, is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, perfect. I think I should be in good time. So lime, Tahiti lime, also called the Persian lime. It does have an off-season, extended season production is possible. Flowering January to March, harvest June to September. Flowering to harvest 90 to 120 days. You get about 200 to 250 pounds per tree when they're about 6 years old. Fruit size in some cultivars may be small with high fruit set, and you can get away from that by thinning out some of the fruit. And we have about 60 acres in Florida and very few in South Florida. That's probably smaller now because of our next slide. The issue, citrus greening. Everybody wants to grow citrus, including homeowners, but citrus greening is devastating. They're working really hard in the center of the state, University of Florida, at some cultivars that can be tolerant of citrus greening, but it's a real issue. And if you have citrus, you probably have citrus greening already. And they did a big study at Trek where they grew limes, and they want to see if it was economically feasible, because you can sell limes from Florida if you have them, because they're bigger and they're juicier than the ones from Mexico. But all the pesticides they did, everything they did to stop the leafhopper that spreads citrus greening cost a lot. And then and they still all got citrus greening, the whole area, all the different rootstocks, every different type they had, they all got citrus greening, and that caused the fruit to be smaller, less quantity of fruit, less juice. So it was, in the long run, it looks like a no-go to do that commercially. There's also citrus canker. Snow scale, and then citrus leaf miner, this bottom right picture, you'll see that a lot. The miner actually gets in between the leaf layers and kind of drills through there. Mango, this was your #1 pick when we did the poll. I see Dr. Crane put in the Lauriaceae, which it's not, that's avocados. It's in the Anacardiaceae. So this has a lot of potential, I think. It's got a diverse niche market, fresh, green, processed. Harvest season has started. I actually got a few fruit in April. It goes to about September. There's over 1,000 acres in Florida. Production 100 to 250 pounds per tree. And this one, you have to look at your cultivars. If you're just growing Tommy Atkins or Kit or Kent, which are the mainstays, you're gonna have a harder time selling them than if you have some of these new cultivars that are out there. I mean, I know one grower that has just cutting edge cultivars. He sells off his porch. He does a really big business. So I can talk to you more about that individually if you want to set an appointment with me. I also do farm visits, and those are free. So many different types of mangoes. There's over 1,000 different cultivars. And some of them are much more disease resistant than others. So anthracnose is a big problem. Bacterial black spot is a new problem that's more, it hasn't really devastated South Florida, but it's a little bit further up North Florida, like West Palm area. There are some cultivars that don't do well in South Florida conditions. Alphonse is probably the #1 loved mango in all of the world, but it doesn't grow well in South Florida because of humidity. And some things, if some mangoes, if they are ready earlier in the season, like now, or even early June, they usually miss the hurricanes and they miss a lot of that rain, which causes the anthracnose. And you can spray for anthracnose and you'd be okay. This year, though, it was powdery mildew that did the major damage that burned off all the flowering. And you can spray for powdery mildew as well. And anthracnose is usually when it's wetter, and powdery mildew is when it's drier. So if you have blooms and it's very dry, you need to spray sulfur to knock out that powdery mildew. And unless you did that this year, you lost your crop. Avocados. West Indian, Guatemalan hybrids. A lot of people, when they think of avocados, they think of the little small sort of purple avocado, the Haas. We can't grow that here. You might be able to get away with it a little bit further up the state because it needs to be cooler, but commercially can't be grown. It's grown in California and big time in Mexico. So we have these big green skin avocados, and they're much bigger. They have less fat than the Haas types. We have about a 10-month harvest period, and that's not one cultivar. So you have different cultivars that come in. Like the first one that's ready is a Rue. One of the last ones that's ready is Monroe. So you have, if you have different cultivars in your grove, you kind of spread it out. But I mentioned this earlier, Laurel Wilt, huge problem. I could give you a whole hour on Laurel Wilt, but we won't get into that now. But it's a problem, it's fatal, and it's everywhere. And then if you have low-lying areas where it's wet, you're gonna have problems with Phytophthora, a root rot. So that's, remember we talked about avocados, they don't do well where it's wet, and that's why. Finger limes, this is a new crop, and I saw these in California, and it's something to think about. They're very spiny, so they're very difficult to pick. California, they're doing okay with them. It's a very niche market. You don't just pick them off the tree and eat them. You would use them as sort of a garnish or with a very expensive mixed drink. So there is a market for this now, but as more and more people grow it, and this really goes for all your tropical fruit. If you have something new and you start growing it and it starts making money, then you can know that more people are going to follow behind you. And initially, it might not have a lot of, if you can hear that construction, it's right outside my window. I'm having a wedding here in like 6 days, so things are going, things are popping. And the other thing is, if there's not a lot of acreage, you're going to have lower disease pressure. That happened with dragon fruit, where initially there weren't a lot of diseases for dragon fruit, also called Pattaya. But as more groves went in and in, then now we have all kinds of issues with Pattaya. Canistel, also called Caniste. This one's related to Meme and Sappadilla. Not a lot of acreage of this. Easy to produce though, and very manageable tree. It's one that I like as a horticulturally, I like it a lot. But this is one that no one's gonna steal the fruit in my grove. They're stealing Meme, they're stealing avocado, they're stealing mango, but this one doesn't get stolen. So that's just a little hint. But it does have its place. It's very good when you cook with it because it maintains its color and its density. So that is something. And there are groups that really enjoy Canistel. There's another fruit that's closely related called Lucuma that you can't grow here. So if you have someone that loves Lucuma, give them a Canistel tree and tell them it's Lucuma, and then you'll be a hero. I did that with my girlfriend's parents. It's not Lucuma. So very few issues with Canistel. Caimito, this one is also related to Canistel, Meme, and Sappadilla. Different sizes, good production. Again, it's a niche market. There's only about 11 acres. And some growers have selected, so they have very big fruit. This is one that has some problems with wind scarring. But the tree itself, you can see it's related to the satin leaf, the native tree, the satin leaf, which is a beautiful tree. It has these shiny leaves when the wind blows, it's gorgeous. So this is one that would make a very good ornamental tree but also give you fruit. But it needs some wind protection because the fruit will scar as they rub against each other and as they rub against the branches. So it can also get sunburn. The fruit can be small, so you might need to thin. So here we have some different sizes, different cultivars. It's hard to get these different cultivars. Like you can buy different cultivars of mangoes fairly easily and avocados, but Caimito, they're gonna say, this is a Caimito. They're not really gonna, it's very difficult to get like the Blanco, et cetera, et cetera. Guava, this one, it can be white or it can be pink. It has problems with fruit flies. So you need to bag them. You see this bottom left picture, they're bagging. So it's a lot of labor to do that. If you drive through Homestead, you'll see these trees with all these bags all over the trees. Those are guavas where they're protecting it from the fruit fly. If you don't do that, the fruit fly is going to get in there. So you can keep the tree small, has a long harvest season. These are the pluses. Negatives is the Caribbean fruit fly. So labor intensive, a lot of spraying, a lot of bagging, and it does get white fly, it does get scale. If you have a lot of different fruit trees in your grove, this will be the one that shows insect pests first, because they really like it. Wax jambu, this is very small acreage. You do have some need for this fruit. It's very sort of a rosy, airy type flavor when you bite into it. So many different colors, types. Passion fruit, we've had a lot of workshops on this recently. We're going to have another one in June. And this is sort of up and coming, but this is a vine, so you need a very good trellis system to grow it, so there's more input initially. And issues, you might need to hand pollinate because we don't have the carpenter bee that's the main pollinator. Diseases, you have root rot and you have a lot of viruses. So, and you grow these by cuttings. That's how you propagate them. So if you have a grove and you're going to grow more in another part of your grove, you take cuttings from one and you grow that, and that particular one had the virus. Now all your babies have virus too. And if you go and you cut, if you prune one section that has a virus and you go and prune another section that has a virus, that doesn't have the virus, your pruning tools just pass the disease. So you need to clean your tools in between each cut, and you need to test your mother plants for the virus. There are tests available. I can hook you up with those. It's easy to do. You can do it yourself, or you can bring it into the plant diagnostic clinic at the Tropical Research Education Center, and they will do the testing for you. They do a lot of testing there for a lot of different things. So it's a very good resource. Guanabana, this is kind of coming up a little bit. It's related to sugar apple and Atamoya. It does need some wind protection. It is not cold tolerant. So mine in my grove has been beat back by the cold. And then when they prune the lychee trees for the lychee Aranos mite, they dropped a big branch on my Guanabana. So I have not had any fruit, but you'll fare much better if you have just a grove of this. Sugar apple, also related to Guanabana and Atamoya. You also have custard apple, which is another one that's related. So it needs a little wind protection, sort of a weak root system, but you can prune it very well, very easily. It maintains its size, comes back real nice, gets super ugly in the winter, but then it comes out with all new leaves. So don't worry if your trees look like they're dying in the winter because they're just getting ready to shed their leaves. It does have a big problem with the Annona seed borer, and so do the other Annonas. So it's a little seed borer that gets in, bores into the fruit, and that opens it up to anthracnose, which causes mummification. So if you ever see sugar apples and the whole thing is just black, that's what happened. So that is an issue. So here's some different cultivars. And you know when they're ready, when they sort of, when the sections here sort of come apart a little bit, and you see a little color in between. So this one top left is way ready. This one bottom middle is ready. You see it's coming a little apart there in the section. So you could pick that and it would be ready within a day or two. Sappadilla, not a lot of problems with Sappadilla. So pretty durable plant, about 250 acres. This one is related to Meme and Canistel and Caimito. So it's got a lot of sap. You know when you pick this, when it's ready, you would nick it. And if it's brown underneath, it's ready. If you nick it and you see green or sap, the white latex, it's not ready, it's not mature. So the main issue is these Lepidoptera, these caterpillars that get into it, but you can easily spray for those with something like Dipel, which is very light type of pesticide. Meme, again in the Sapataceae. So this is one that is very culturally, some cultures really like it, some don't. This one makes very good milkshakes, and it's good to eat out of hand, but they're very big. And then you have two main types, the Magana, which is ready in the spring, or the Pantene, which is ready in July and August. Pantene is also called Key West. Some people call it that. This is one that's hard to prune because it has flowers and fruit at the same time. The new flowers and the old fruit at the same time. And I tell people to prune when you pick that last fruit. That's the time of year to pick. But these will already have the new fruit coming on. So very difficult to prune it without knocking off fruit. So get some chill temp problems, root rot. This is another one that doesn't like wet feet. It can have iron and zinc deficiency. And Cuban May beetle is an issue. And then the thrips, this bottom, the top right picture is the beetle that comes this time of month, May beetle, or this time of year. And then you have the thrips, which someone just sent me a picture of their meme that had sort of a curling on the leaves, which is what the thrips do. And there you see one of the thrips on the underside of the leaf there in the circle. Black sapote, very little acreage of this, also called chocolate pudding fruit, which I will not call it that because it doesn't taste like chocolate pudding at all. And I was at a fruit stand one time and the little kid was like, Mom, chocolate pudding fruit, can I get it? And they got it. And I know that child was disappointed. So it's been remarketed as chocolate pudding fruit because the inside, as you see on the bottom right here, it does look like chocolate pudding, but the flavor is not going to get you there. Longan, this is one that doesn't have a lot of issues. It's related to lychee, and you can trick it into fruiting by putting certain chemicals on it in the off season, so you can get more of a price for your fruit. The normal time you're going to pick it is in July. It looks like lychee and longan are also having a bad year this year. So you probably want to thin out the fruit. It's going to have so much fruit that the fruit are going to be small. So you want to take about a third of that panicle. All the fruit come in these panicles. You want to take about a third off to fatten up the rest of the fruit. You can get the lychee webworm will also attack longan. And then you have the Sri Lankan weevil, which is very difficult to control, and that gets on longan and lychee. Lychee needs a certain amount of cool temperatures. They need a banked amount of cool temperatures to properly flower and fruit. So it's getting less and less likely that we're going to have good crops down in Homestead because it's getting a wee bit warmer. So those banked hours of cold, like you would with a peach, we're not getting it. So you're moving up a little bit of the state with lychee production. And Mauritius of the cultivars, to me, is the most reliable. You can get bigger prices for something like an Emperor or Sweetheart, but you might not get fruit. So issues, you need those bank chill hours, the Sri Lankan weevil, the lychee webworm, and the new one that came into the West Coast in 2018, the lychee Aranos mite lem. So if you see those warts on your lychee, you've got it. And I'm getting a lot of calls about it. Out of my last 25 calls, probably 22 have been on lychee Aranos mite. So it's a real issue. I showed you the fact sheet on that on my website. It's very difficult to control. So I would lean away from putting in a grove of lychee right now or avocado because of LEM and then because of Laurel Wilt. Laurel Wilt does not like young avocado trees though. So some people are doing a lot of replanting of avocados. Oh, I'm over my time, so I'm gonna go real quick. Pattaya, dragon fruit. This one is a cactus, so you need to keep it really dry. Issues, it needs a big trellis, has pollination issues. Lots of different diseases. Carambola, easier to grow, needs some wind protection, produces a lot of fruit. Issues, cool temperatures, drought, and then it needs some minor elements for sure. And thank you so much for your time. I'm sure we're going to have some questions. So let's get to those, and I'll let Jessica take the lead here.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Jeff. That was great. Tons of information. I know we're throwing a lot at you. So like Jeff said, if you need, follow up on specific crop or, specific topic, feel free to reach out. But it looks like Julietta had a few questions. So she says, Jeff, how are the agricultural zones changing in Florida? And are groves like mangoes able to move a little bit north up due to zone B, for example, getting warmer, similar to how we are now able to grow vanilla here in South Florida?
So we're shifting for sure. They haven't officially changed the zones, but I think they're looking into that. They may have changed them a little, but I can't find the new maps, but we're definitely shifting a little. But I gave a talk. I was on a panel called Gardening in the Panhandle Live, and it was about growing tropical fruit up there. But at this point, no, you can't grow it all the way up there, but you can sort of grow it a little bit further north than you used to. Maybe one more zone up, like a half zone, I think is okay. But remember, even where I'm at, you will still get a freeze. It will come, it will happen. It just takes one freeze to knock out your entire growth.
Yeah,
So,
very true.
so have cold protection in place. Have a plan for cold protection.
Okay. She also wants to know, can lychee groves move up the state where it's a little bit colder? So they're, as these ag zones are changing.
Yeah, and they have. I get more calls now with new groves up the state than I do in South Florida. Nobody's putting in a new lychee grove in South Florida, but there are some up the state a little bit.
And lychees, longans, those aren't super consistent producers, right? So
Longan
on top of it, you have this every other year potentially. Yeah,
lychees are tricky, and longans are more consistent, and you can trick them. I'm blanking on the chemical that you can use, but we have a whole fact sheet on that I can send to you guys, that you put out this chemical into the roots and it tricks them into blooming in the off season. You can't do that with other tropical fruit, but this one you can. It is pretty aggressive though, so you can't do it every year. You have to let the trees rest. but growers do that.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Francis wants to know, I can't tell when my pomegranate is ripe. I've read that they will not continue. I'm guessing continue to ripen after picked. So he said they're kind of a yellowish color.
Well, I'm going to be honest. We can't grow pomegranates where I'm at. It's too warm. So I don't know the first thing about pomegranates. I'm going to put my cards on the table and show you that I have a 2 and a 7. I don't have aces here. So I don't know about that. But, you know, whenever you have a fruit that you don't know how to pick it, you can do a little search about that online, but you can also just pick it at different stages and you can figure that out on your own. If you have one that changes from one color to another, typically that's telling you that it's mature. It might just be by size. So it might be where it connects to the fruit, that area kind of opens up a little bit. So just really pay attention. And then next time you can tell me the answer to that question. But I do get questions on pomegranates, so I'm going to have to bone up a little on pomegranates, even though we can't grow them here.
Yeah, we don't really grow them here either, over on the West Coast in Collier County. I haven't heard of anyone being really successful growing them. So yeah, report back to us. Let us know what you find out. And that's part of it too. And Jeff touched on it, you know, can you grow Haas avocado? Not really, but maybe, you know, if you want to try, I wouldn't start a business on it, but if you want to try in your own home landscape, you never know what you can do. Report back on it. Our citizen scientists. So what other questions do we have? Okay, Zena wants to know, are there certain varieties of avocado that are more resistant to laurel wilt?
Zena, that's a great question. Unfortunately, it has a bad answer. Laurel wilt affects all different types of all different cultivars of avocados. West Indian avocados have a sort of bigger tubes inside of them, so the disease spreads a little quicker. But really, any variety of avocado, if the beetle gets in and it's carrying that fungus, it's gonna pass away. It's gonna die. So unfortunately, the answer to that is no. And the disease has gotten all the way up to North Carolina and as far west as East Texas. So it has not got into the groves in Mexico or California, but we've traveled a couple times to California to sort of beat the drums and warn them that it can get there because it moves on anything in the Lauriaceae, anything related to avocado. So you have things like swamp bay and red bay, these natives that are all through the Everglades that are reservoirs of the disease. And that's how it came in. It came in through Savannah, Georgia, where there's really no avocados, but the red bays that were there kept the disease, and then it moved right down the state till it got to avocado groves.
So what age are they typically affected with the laurel wilt?
So yeah, I did mention that the younger trees, the beetles don't like the younger trees because they're skinny. They like a big fat area to drill into, and the females are carrying a fungus. They're very small, they're very tiny. If you look at a penny, you look at 2 of the numbers on the year, that's how big they are. They're really small. The females carry a fungus that they're gonna grow to feed their young. So they drill into a bigger tree, so let's say 7 years and above, and then they make these galleries, they start growing the fungus to feed their young. The tree reacts to the fungus. The tree says there's a fungus. So it tries to block its xylem, which is the wood in the middle where the water goes up. It compartmentalizes. That's what trees do. So the disease is, the fungus is very aggressive, so it jumps the block. It blocks, it jumps, it blocks, it jumps. So the tree hyper reacts and blocks itself so it can no longer get water. And that's why you have this quick wilt. So the younger trees, you can probably go for about 7 years before you get the disease, most likely.
Nice. Okay. I put a link there in the chat box if everyone can click on this while we're still answering some questions. Again, this is just like a 1-minute survey to let us know how you use this class or areas that we can improve in. So this really helps us with our reporting at the end of the year. If you wouldn't mind just taking 1 minute and filling that out. But Julietta wants to know too, it's maybe off topic, but are you or Jeff familiar with any growers in Collier, Broward, Dade counties under protective screen production systems cups like Polk County is starting to do for citrus? I don't know of any, in the tropical fruit world that are doing like a cups type system. Do you, Jeff?
No, not down in our area. We're not doing that. And we're with the only citrus we've really done is the Tahiti lime. People think of Florida as the citrus state, and then you think of Miami as the tropical fruit area, but we don't really grow citrus commercially for the most part, except Tahiti limes. And now with citrus greening and other issues, Mexico flooding the market being another issue, we don't grow a lot of citrus, so we don't use cups. We haven't really tried it.
Okay. And she also wants to know if cups would protect, so I guess, would it protect tropical fruit trees from other things? So could you implement a cup system here?
I think you could, but it would be very, very expensive. And the one that you would think about would be like for avocados and Laurel Wilt. But remember, these are big trees. So, and they need pollination. So if you're excluding small insects, you're excluding the pollinators as well. So that becomes a big issue. So I think that's the main reason they haven't been done.
Yeah, and I would say for most tropical fruit pests, besides the ones like the avocado gets, they're pretty manageable.
Mm-hmm.
So you wouldn't need to put the time and the resources and the money into building structures like that. But it's a very good question. And yes, we're going to be sending you the recording link, and we're going to put these PowerPoints in a PDF so that you can review this information. And there's tons of links in the PowerPoints too that you can click on and again go down the rabbit hole. So yeah, any other questions? This has been a fun class. We're really glad that you could join us this morning. We'll stay on for another couple minutes if someone has a question, but for those of you that want to get going, thanks for spending your Saturday morning with us, and we'll hopefully be in touch. Let us know if you want to be on our mailing list, and have a great Saturday. All right,